Oh no, I just deleted my recording for today. I didn't do one yesterday. What a nightmare. And I was up to like 20 minutes. I still have this nagging cough, and my voice is about done for the day. I was just about to wrap it up, and I accidentally deleted it. Oh, how embarrassing. So, I'm going to try and redo all this. I guess I'm going to cut a lot out. I had talked about Bolsonaro. I had talked about, oh God, what was the second thing? Well, the DHS leaks was the main topic. Oh, the indictment of David DePape. I got into that a bit. I guess I'll try and get to all this again. Just the highlights of what's important, which is what I should do anyway. I ramble on too long most days. The indictment of David DePape. You can choose to believe it if you want. Frankly, the FBI has no credibility. Until we hear recording of his so-called Mirandized interview, I'm not going to take it too seriously. It could be true, sure. I think that one theory that would explain David DePape's Mirandized interview, which for those of you who haven't read it, I recommend you go do it. He basically comes across as a typical Republican patriot who has taken things too far. He feels like he's just one of the American patriots from 1776 fighting against the British, and that Nancy Pelosi is a tyrant, and so he was going to break her kneecaps. Now, frankly, based on everything we know about David DePape, everything that his neighbors say, everything that we know about his past, before October the 24th, when those sort of right-wing blog posts were put up on his website and then backdated, everything we know about David DePape prior to October 24th obviously contradicts this narrative of him being a would-be MAGA assassin. But frankly, the profile to me comes across as some kind of MK Ultra experiment gone wrong. I think that if he's a genuine criminal, i.e. not a plant of some sort, not an MK Ultra experiment, he must suffer from some sort of multiple personality disorder, because his main personality seems to be a typical left-wing Berkeley hippie, and he, at least in this interview, as represented by the FBI in their indictment, comes across as a typical, or I shouldn't say typical, a very extreme MAGA Republican who's willing to take his politics to the next level and use violence to achieve his political ends, i.e. a MAGA terrorist. These two archetypes are just simply incompatible. He can't be both. The way he talks, he does not talk at all like someone who is ever a Berkeley hippie, by the way, Canadian illegal immigrant. These kinds of minds, they work completely differently. An illegal immigrant Berkeley hippie, nudist, did I mention that before? Does not think at all like a 1776 2.0 Alex Jones listener. Hey, I'm going to take liberty into my own hands and take down the tyrants. These are very different mindsets. And this is not something that can exist in the same man's head, two times. Either he has some kind of a break in his life and he becomes this, or he's not it to begin with, or he has some kind of multiple personality disorder and he switches back and forth. Everything we have on him prior to October 24th was of a total left-wing archetype. And everything that we have on him after October 24th, we're led to believe that he is this MAGA terrorist. So that's all I have to say on the FBI indictment. The story's been changed multiple times. The third guy in the room has now been taken out of the official narrative. The story about the welfare check call, that's out. Apparently the official narrative now is that Paul Pelosi made the call and they've released a tape. I applaud them, I guess, at least for releasing a tape. And so, yeah, that's all we have on that for now. Now, the big story from yesterday was the DHS leaks. And the DHS leaks I explained in pretty good detail in my now deleted recording. I'll try and go through that again, maybe an abridged version. Most of you probably have heard a lot about it elsewhere. I don't need to summarize all the leaks themselves, but the basic idea is that we have now confirmation that the social media giants are de facto government agencies. The way I explain this is that if you look at a company like Lockheed Martin once upon a time made airliners. They were a company that made airplanes for people who wanted to buy airplanes. And somewhere along the road, they discovered that the federal government was a very good customer and that they didn't need to sell to regular people anymore. They just need to sell warbirds. And that's what they've done for a very long time now. Lockheed Martin, all of their revenue comes from the federal government. Their R&D budget comes from the federal government. Their employees are paid with federal government money. They are a de facto federal government agency. That is what happens in the private sector in this country. Once you get to be a certain size company, you can't grow anymore without merging with the government to a certain extent. That is how big businesses are made. Otherwise, you would have businesses, burn themselves out. They would be outcompeted, or there would just be enough competitors to where the businesses themselves could never gain, much of a stronghold. The way you get these big monopolies are through partnerships with the government, whether that be state, local, federal, but in most of these cases, we're talking about the federal government. And so the purpose of these de facto government agencies, which were working in partnership with the DHS and the FBI, was to censor narratives that were harmful to the federal government and to promote narratives that were favorable to the federal government. If you look at the pattern of censorship, this was always obvious because the types of topics that were censored were always topics that were and trends that were harmful to the regime and to the regime's narrative, particularly at any given time. And this didn't always line up with what you would expect to be the rational self-interest of these big tech companies as private corporations. It was never in the interest of the shareholders. It was always clearly, that was the common denominator. If you could make the argument maybe that individual trends that were censored were unfavorable to the corporation and the shareholders, and that they were trying to protect their rational financial self-interest, but you couldn't argue that for every trend. What you could argue for every single trend that was censored, and everything that you weren't allowed to say, like learn to code, and the Wu flu came from a lab in China, these were all things that countered the regime's narratives at that given time. And so that is the common thread that linked all of the censorship across social media for all these years. And so now we find out that the social media giants were meeting at least once a month with the federal government, and the federal government also had a backdoor to flag trends and posts and to tell the social media guys, hey, you need to take this down. You need to get this. This is bad. This is undermining faith in the regime. This is undermining our stability and our dominance over the American psyche. So, considering that this doesn't really tell us anything new, it only confirms what we could already pretty fairly imply. How does this help? Well, frankly, it's direct evidence that you can provide to people who just are slow when it comes to this stuff. Most people don't think about things like this, and they're just going to buy into the propaganda most of the time. This gives you an opportunity to directly show someone, hey, what you're being told by Facebook or Twitter or whatever website, YouTube, is overt federal propaganda. It is explicitly propaganda. And here's the proof from a left-wing news site. Mostly, these days, you're going to have to convince liberals of this. The right is much more open, but, not so much, or not entirely. I completely lost where I was. Forgive me. I'm having a rough couple of days when it comes to recording this stuff. First yesterday I didn't have any time because I was too busy, and then today I deleted the whole thing, and now I forgot my place. So I'll pick up somewhere new. The Republicans are going to take control of Congress. They're going to have a firm grip on Congress. They're not going to have a 60-vote, veto or not, a 60-vote filibuster-proof majority in the Senate or anything like that. But they're going to have plenty of seats in both houses of Congress. They're going to be able to exert some power. And considering that their voters are the ones who are affected most by the censorship and by all this, they're in a position to try and rein in the bureaucracy, to investigate them, and try and hold them accountable the way that Senator Frank Church did back in the 70s with the Church Committee, where he exposed so much of the intelligence community's ops that they were carrying out against the American people, like MK Ultra. And frankly, the guy in David DePape reeks of MK Ultra. I'll just leave it at that. Anyway, the Republicans have the incentive and the opportunity and the power to take all this information that's been leaked and turn that into something good for their voters and for America. Will they do it, though? No. The leaders of the Republican Party in the House and the Senate are not Andy McCarthy, what's his name? Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell, respectively. Both of them, their number one interest is not in helping their voters or growing the power of the Republican Party itself. It is in maintaining and expanding their own power within the Republican Party. These are very provincially minded men. They're not team players. They're entirely self-interested, and they care about their own power. And so, frankly, this censorship, going after and killing the censorship and trying to undermine the bureaucracy, that will help dissident voices within the Republican Party, the insurgent candidates, the more populist elements. That's who will be helped by stopping the bureaucracy from co-opting the public square and censoring free speech in this country. So Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy do not have the same incentive that you might expect them to have. And so therefore, I think that the most likely scenario is that we get something along the lines of the January 6th committee, which in and of itself is reminiscent of the Benghazi committee. These are like fake church committees where they have a lot of grandstanding and they talk about, all the problems of whatever the issue is and then don't actually do anything. And the point is, hey, we can't do enough right now, so we need you to vote harder in the next election. Now, there's going to be a lot of good people, new people coming into the House and the Senate. So hopefully, maybe there will be enough pressure from decent people who actually want a real, who really want to crack down on the bureaucracy over this, crack down on the FBI, crack down on DHS, and end all this. But I think that it's a less than 50% chance that we get anything substantial and real out of all this. But this is still powerful evidence that we can cite for years going into the future to fight against federal government propaganda. This is something that we can use as individuals and show other people to try and enlighten them. Hey, we can always go back to this article in The Intercept, which I will link down below, detailing what the federal government has been doing and how they are been manipulating public opinion and propagandizing us covertly. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.